Setting a font in CSS is step 1. Step 2 is controlling the appearance of that font depending on the result that you want. For example, you might want to add additional space between each line in CSS, or maybe a little bit of space between each word if you want your content to be more readable. Let's look at how to control the appearance and spacing of the fonts that you choose in CSS. In this example, we use a game store web page. I have some HTML pre-written out that lists the store's locations. I want you to pay particular attention to the font sizes in this chapter. You can set font sizes either via pixels, ems, or percentages. In fact, these are all equivalent. This is a lot to explain, so I suggest that you look at the chart in this chapter text that breaks down the equivalent values of pixels, percentages, and ems in one chart. The chart in the chapter text explains this in a lot more detail. Now, to keep things a little bit simple for this screencast, let's talk about another property called letter spacing. You may notice this H2 property that I've already selected in CSS, or this H2 element rather, is here. Visit our locations. Text that is all uppercase can be a little bit cramped and hard to read. In this case, you should use the letter spacing property to add a bit of space between each letter. You should set this value in ems. Now you can go all the way up to a ridiculous number here, like 5 ems, but this is completely unreadable and it's not worth it. So we're going to go back to 0.08. Although I could just make this 1 and it would still be kind of interesting looking. Maybe go down to 0.5. You really can play around with the type of effect that you want visually for your text. Especially if you're going for a retro 80s vibe, adding a lot of space can actually make your website look fairly theatrical. Now, another spacing property that is similar to letter spacing is word spacing. I'm going to actually scroll down to where this quote is. This is a paragraph with the ID of quote. I've already set the font size to be a little bit larger than normal. And when I uncomment this line of code, I want you to be able to see the difference in the word spacing immediately. All of a sudden, there's space between the words games bring us together. This probably won't be a property you use often, but again, like letter spacing, it can make your text look a little bit more theatrical. Now, more usefully than either of those two properties is the line height property that we'll check out in a second. Just look at this paragraph first. It's a lot of text, right? The lines kind of cramped together, so think back when you were writing papers at school. Your teachers often ask you to submit them with 1.5 line spacing or double spacing. This is what the line height property does. Just adds spaces between each line of text. Once I add a line height property of 1.4 ems, you'll see that there's additional space between each line of text, and the text therefore becomes more readable. By using a combination of font size, line height, word spacing, and letter spacing, you can end up with a really interesting mix of sizing effects in your text.